My two main personality traits of being an author and being a fangirl combine very, very well into being a very obsessive reader. There are so many authors out there that I really admire, and so many books that have inspired me to write my own. They brought me joy, they've made me cry, everything you'd normally expect from reading a book. So I thought I would share with you my current top 10 books, so that maybe you'd want to read them and they will also bring you joy, make you cry, inspire you to write your own books, whatever you want to get out of reading. Starting off with my all-time favourite book. I talk about this book so much, it did directly inspire me to write my own book. If you don't already know, my debut novel, A Royal's Game, came out last May. It is a young adult dystopian fantasy, so when I say the next book, you will see I directly inspired this and gave me so many ideas. The first book is Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. Red Queen is a young adult dystopian fantasy book. It's set in dystopian America. It follows the main character called Mare, who is living in the Kingdom of Norta, and she's working with the rebellion called the Scarlet Guard. She gets sent to the palace to go and essentially spy, be part of one of the Scarlet Guard's missions. It's been a while since I read this book. However, what makes this world unique is that the people are divided by having red blood and silver blood. So red blood are regular humans like you and me. Silver bloods are the nobility of the world. They have abilities. However, when Mare is at the palace during the, I believe it's called the Queen's Trials, it's so the Crown Prince called Cal, he can find his wife and like they can show their abilities and like show that they're going to be the strongest queen. And she ends up falling into the arena and revealing that she actually is a red blood that has an ability. It all kind of goes on from there. This was the first book that I read that combined dystopian and fantasy and powers and royalty, which if you have read A Royal's Game, you will see how I inspired my 14-year-old self. My copy of Red Queen is actually signed. I went to Victoria Aveyard's Fates Breaker tour last year. Very, very cool. I got to meet her. I gave her a letter that I wrote her. Fangirled so hard when I met her. Actually, it was recently the 10-year anniversary of Red Queen. I posted a picture from that night of my signed book and she reposted it on her story, which was so cool. I freaked out so hard. Yeah, so if you like The Hunger Games and Divergent, if you want to go back to like the 2015 dystopian era, this is one of the OGs. The love triangle in it, and lots of people are not fans of love triangles. Love triangle in this book is so good because both options are good, depending which way you see it. The plot twist in this book was my first proper heartbreak with a book. 13-year-old Georgina did not know what was coming. If you want to get really, really specific, my favourite book in this series is probably King's Cage. Read that book and you've read the whole series, you'll probably know why. If you're getting into fantasy, I would really, really recommend this book. It definitely got me into fantasy when I was 13. And it has such a good world building and political side to it, whilst also having that love triangle as well. Never, ever, ever stop recommending this book to people. As well as Red Queen and Realm Breaker, Victoria is also currently writing her adult pirate book called The Tempest. I'm so excited. I will read anything that she writes, to be honest. Next up, we have Once Upon a Broken Heart. If you want to get specific, I controversially do actually prefer Caraval. We have the special edition box set of Caraval. However, Once Upon a Broken Heart is still definitely in my top 10. If you haven't seen Once Upon a Broken Heart on TikTok and across BookTok, then Once Upon a Broken Heart is the spin-off series of Caraval. Follows a character who's called Evangeline. It kind of starts off with her stepsister married to the guy that she was dating, and she goes to the Prince of Hearts church and she's like praying because she's going through a lot of heartbreak and she doesn't know how to deal with the fact that her stepsister is going to be marrying the guy that she likes. Again, it's been a while since I've read this book. Apologies if any of this is wrong. And the Prince of Hearts, Jax, turns up. He's also in Caraval. Kind of goes from there. She essentially, after the events of the wedding and a little plot twist there, he ends up getting invited by the Empress to go to the Meridian Empire. And she meets the prince up there and ends up getting engaged to him. So much happens in this book. Evangeline is very much one of those soft female main characters which I absolutely adore. Just because she's soft, it doesn't mean that she's weak-willed. She is such a well-written character. Stephanie Garber is so good at writing female characters that don't just throw punches and are just really like quippy. She actually writes them where they have empathy and they want to be good and like they use their kindness more than anything else. Which when I was like 13, 14, I loved the like really quippy characters. It was such a common thing back in the day to describe them as like a stubborn female main character, which I still think there's such a place for that. But I personally, at 20 years old now, the person I've become, I prefer these main characters so much more. I just think it's so nice that they want to keep being good and that they don't necessarily want to hurt people. The romance, not just the romance, the yearning in this book. Like, if you are not a fan of the more like adult fantasy, there's like current smart, which I'm not opposed to it. I think it has such a place in the genre. But a fan of it, you literally have to wait 3 books for them to kiss. Like, and it's the same in Caraval. Stephanie Garber is so good at creating so much tension and so much yearning, making it so tense without them actually kissing or sleeping together. I think it's such a skill as a writer. It makes it so much more rewarding when it actually happens. There is a kind of like another love triangle in this book between Evangeline, Jax, and Apollo. I mean, it's pretty obvious who you kind of want her to go with. And she just wants her fairy tale. She wants her fairy tale ending. She, her father's died. She's all alone with the shop. She wants to live out the dreams and the stories that she got read when she was younger, which I think we can all relate to. Again, this is a very good fantasy book to start off with if you have not read much fantasy. It's very much more, compared to Caraval, this is much more of a romantasy. Whereas Caraval, I think, whilst it has so much romance in it, I wouldn't call it a romantasy, personally. Moving swiftly on from that, Legendary. So Legendary is the second book of Caraval. This is specifically my favourite one because I am very much a Teller fan. I'm very much a Teller girly. I love Scarlet as well, so much. But I just personally, maybe it's just because I'm a younger sibling, I resonate with Teller so much more. I support women's rights. I support women's wrongs in this book. Teller she's powerful and she is slightly more quippy than Scarlet, but she is still so feminine and she's still like more of like a soft female main character compared to the other characters you read about. I won't say too much about the plot because you do need to read Caraval first, obviously. But I love this book because it is in Teller's point of view. And I love the whole introduction of characters in this book. This is the book that you meet Jax in. It's so interesting, but because it's not just that they're playing the Caraval game, there's so much more to it. Honestly, the humor, it's just so funny. Jax is so funny, Teller's so funny, Dante is so funny. You also see Scarlet in this book as well, obviously, and you get to see her with her boo being very, very cute. I won't say who that is because that spoils the first book. Actually, go and read everything that Stephanie Garber has written. She is one of my favourite authors and she just does whimsical fantasy so well. If you want to read something that isn't really down and dirty with the political side of fantasy, which I love that side of fantasy, but if you want to read from one whimsical side, read this book. I also feel the need to add that Caraval and Once Upon a Broken Heart has very, very much inspired the current book that I'm writing. I won't say specifically what that is yet. I haven't talked about it too much. I do talk about it a little bit on my Instagram, which you should definitely go and follow. Moving away from fantasy for a moment, my favourite book that is not fantasy is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. The TV show for this book came out last summer, which I actually really enjoyed the TV show. I'm really, really excited it's got season 2. I'm so glad that they kept it British. One thing that I do love about this book is the quintessentially Britishness of this book. If you're in America, they have kind of Americanized the story, which I think is such a shame and it's such a weird thing to do. Obviously, this is the British cover. You have the American cover where like the writing's a little bit smaller. It's a slightly more like greyish cover, I think. It's the American one. If you can get your hands on the British one, please do. The American version misses out the first bit where Pip is just essentially rambling. And it also gets rid of all of the British slang, which I think is such like nice thing in this book. Moving on to the plot. So, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is about the main character called Pip, who she's doing her EPQ at sixth form, and she decides to do it on the Andy Bell case, which was closed like 5 years ago. And she decides to solve it properly. She knows that Sal, who was Andy's boyfriend, was not guilty of killing Andy. She knows it in her heart, and she's going to prove it. She teams up with Ravi, who I love Ravi so much. Ravi is Sal's brother, and they work together to figure out who actually killed Andy, and essentially they do the police's job for them. Pip is one of my favourite female main characters. She really did inspire my own character. If you love a really good, heavy book that has such a good subplot of romance in it, but is so character driven by the dedication that Pip feels to solve this case, then you will love this book. It's a trilogy as well as having a tiny little prequel as well. As the books go on, they get so much darker. I loved the progression of this trilogy. The way that Pip's character develops over the series is so good. It had me so hooked. I think Holly Jackson is so good at writing mysteries. She's come out with a couple of other books. I've read all of them. She's also coming out with a new book at some point this year, I think. If you want a really good young adult mystery, read this book. Continuing on with the non-fantasy books, we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This book is so special to me. Like, words can't really describe it. As someone who is on a film degree, I'm in my final year, reading about this age of Hollywood in the 60s is so interesting because it's things that I've learned about, but it's applied in a story. It also flashes back between Evelyn's life in the 60s and the present day, with Monique writing the article about her. The romance in this book is, I'm not sure it could be described as a romance. It has a romantic subplot. It is so heartbreaking, is the only word to describe it. It was one of the first books that I read where the main character was queer. I mean, Evelyn is bisexual, but part of the queer community. The yearning and the secrecy and what they have to go through. I love this book. I love everything that Taylor Jenkins Reid writes. I've read, I think, almost all of her books, maybe one or two. She's so good at writing characters that feel so real. Her dialogue is so good. Obviously, she also wrote Daisy Jones and the Six, which is the main to Amazon Prime show. Very, very, very good book. Very, very good adaptation. Malibu Rising is also in the same universe as well. So is Carito to His Back. All just incredible books. I would really, really recommend them. Let's just say this book helped me realise a few things. Continuing on with that vibe, Cryer's War. Cryer's War needs to be talked more about. It is so good. It's a duology. It is also dystopian. It has Autome in it, which is essentially, they're kind of robots, but they look exactly like humans. It revolves around the two main characters, one's called Cryer, the Cryer's War, and Isla. And Cryer has been designed by her father, who is the sovereign of their nation, to essentially be like flawless and perfect and be able to take over from him when time comes. The world building is quite complex, so I apologize if I get any of it wrong. It's been a while since I've read it, but essentially, I believe the Autome have, it's like 4 pillars that kind of make up how their brain works. When she ends up meeting this girl called Isla, who I believe she sneaks into the castle to carry out some kind of mission for the resistance, ends up saving Cryer from falling off a cliff, and Cryer suddenly realizes that she can like feel emotions towards humans, as Isla is a human, she's not an Autome, and she goes through a whole identity crisis of, why can I feel these things, what am I feeling? She basically has to investigate, like, what was she made for, why is she this way, why is she feeling these things. This book is such a win sapphic community. It's also an Own Voices book. The romance in this book is so incredibly good. I absolutely love Cryer. I think Cryer is so well written, and she's so awkward, but like in like such a good way. She doesn't realize like how much she like rizzes it up with Isla, because she just it's never happened to her before. Had me swooning. I only found out about this book because one of my beta readers called Cal told me about this book when they were giving me recommendations. So shout out to Cal for telling me about Cryer's War. My life has been changed. If we're talking about really good world building, we have to talk about A Dark Shade of Magic. A Dark Shade of Magic needs to be talked about more. I don't know why it's not talked about more, because everyone went crazy for The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Right? It's by the same author, V.E. Schwab. I really hope I'm saying that right. but people forget that a dark shade of magic exists. Follows the two main characters, Cal and Lila. Cal is sort of a prince, sort of not. Essentially, he lives with royalty and like he's basically a prince, but he's not actually by blood. Basically, the world is made up of 4 parallel universes of London. He lives in Red London and he has magic where he can pass between the different worlds. So he kind of acts as like a messenger, essentially, for the royal family. And then you meet Lila, Lila is such a good female main character. She is, I don't even know how to describe Lila. She is definitely not on the soft side at all. She is so badass and so cool. And essentially, her and Kel end up meeting. I believe one of them ties the other one to the bed or something. Not in a sexual way. Let's make that clear. And Lila ends up discovering that she too also has this magic. I believe their magical humans are called Antari. And the story kind of goes on from there. It's so funny. Like, the characters are so funny in this book. It's such a good found family. If you want a really good fantasy book that has good world building, it has a good romantic subplot, has a good found family, you need to read this book. Next up is Defend the Dawn. So Defend the Dawn is the second book in the Defy the Night trilogy. And specifically, similar with Legendary, I'm specifically saying Defend the Dawn because this is my favourite one in the series. This, I would say, is Bridget Kamira's best book, in my personal opinion. I think the romance and the tension and the yearning, but also just like the plot in this book is so incredible. Again, I won't say too much about it because that will spoil the first book, but essentially Defy the Night is a Robin Hood retelling and it follows Tessa and Western, who are the Robin Hood characters of their community. They make medicine and they go and drop it off to people that need it because they steal this thing called moonflowers, which makes the medicine to heal people from the plague that is in their kingdom. However, one night Western ends up going missing and Tessa is so determined to get him back because they are partners in what they do, and she ends up getting kidnapped when she breaks into the castle. And then you get the plot twist. I won't tell you what it is, you need to read it to find out, but it is such an incredible book. It's just an incredible trilogy. Again, the found family is so good. I love the dynamics in this book as well, like the sibling dynamics are so good, and the romantic subplots are so great, and you feel like you really earn the romance in this book, in this whole series. Book number 9 is A Study in Drowning. I love how Ava Reid writes her books. I think she is such a good author at writing very, I don't know how to describe it, almost very like muted and like low-key fantasy books and dark academia. So A Study in Drowning follows Effie, who wins a competition to essentially go and redesign the house that her favourite author used to live in before he died. But it gets a lot more complicated than that. Effie has her own problems. There's the added layer of the fact that she is not allowed to actually study architecture because she's in the women's college. She can't obviously join the men's college where they teach her, but she ends up winning the competition anyway. And they work together to figure out, and she meets this guy called Preston, who is there not because he won the competition, but because he wants to prove that her favourite author was a fraud, which there's so much tension between them, but then Effie kind of sees why he's thinking this, and they work together to figure out if this author was a fraud or not. There's a lot more to it than that, but that is essentially the premise of the plot. I'm mentioning the romance a lot in all these books. I am someone who loves a romantic subplot rather than it being the main plot, because it's normally, I find, better and you feel like you earn it more. I love the romance in this book. Effie has a lot of past traumas that she has to get over, and I think they're dealt with really well in this book. The second one is coming out this year. I'm so excited. I also feel the need to mention that I currently have an advanced copy of Fable for the End of the World, which is Ava Reid's next book. It's out next month, and I received a copy because I work at Waterstone, so I requested it, and it's her sapphic dystopian debut. It's probably the next book I'm going to end up reading after I read my current reads. Again, she is my automatic, like, if she's written it, I will buy it kind of author. And I'm definitely not someone who reads a lot of dark academia books. I would love to read more of them, but I have such a long reading list, I just never quite get around to the ones that I want to read. But I would say if you're like me and you don't read a lot of dark academia, but you're maybe interested in reading some, I would really recommend this book. The vibes are immaculate. Moving on to the final book. I wasn't sure if I was going to add this book to this list because this book only recently came out, but it honestly, I love this book so much, and that is The Dagger and the Flame. Firstly, let's appreciate it says Wield the Dagger. It's so cool. It's such a gorgeous looking book. This book, my Goodreads review, literally says enemies to lovers done right. I am currently someone who is struggling with the romantasy genre, and I think it's kind of because I don't necessarily enjoy romantasy, even though I'm a huge fantasy fan and I love romantic subplots. I'm finding a lot of romantasy is very the world building is kind of non-existent, and the romance, it would be fine if the romance was good in a lot of romantasy books, but I'm finding it's not good. This book proved me wrong. So this book follows the main character who's called Seraphine, and one night her house and her farm gets burnt down, her mum gets killed, she legs it with her dog, she runs to the city of Fantôme, and she runs to this kind of like assassin's guild that her mother always told her that if she ever got into trouble, then go there and they would help her. She ends up being taken in by House Armand, and the people that are in that house, they are called the Cloaks. So they don't necessarily kill people, they mainly steal. And they do this by using a specific type of magic. I actually could not remember off the top of my head what the magic is called. If I remember, I'll put it on the screen. They essentially use it to make their cloaks, which is why they're called the Cloaks. And they then use these cloaks to be able to break into people's houses, steal the stuff that they're assigned to steal, etc, etc. On the flip side, you then have the Daggers, who this guy is, and they use the magic to basically be assassins and kill people. I'm failing to remember exactly how these two end up meeting. It's completely gone from my head. The Cloaks and the Daggers have to end up working together because there is a bigger threat looming over their city, and there is something that is turning regular people into monsters, and they need to figure out what is going on in their city so then they can go back to doing the crime that they want to do. There is so much hidden legacies and hidden secrets in this book. Dual POV, which is I love dual POV in these kind of books. I actually mainly listen to the audiobook for this, which is one of the reasons why I love this book. The audiobook is read by Emily Carey and Freddie Carter. If you don't know, Freddie Carter played Kaz in the Shadow and Bone Netflix show, and Emily Carey plays Alicent in House of Dragon. I'm in love with both of them, and their voices match the characters so well. It definitely added to why I love this book. Their romance is so well earned in this book. There's such a good plot to it as well as the romance, which is why I love it. The ending, I did not actually see coming, and the ending was so heartbreaking, but the sequel is coming out this year, I believe. I cannot wait for it. Those are my current top 10 books. There's definitely so many other books that I could mention. As I said, because I am such a fangirl, I am such an appreciator of so many books, so many works of literature. I can't get over how incredible some authors are at what they do. If you end up reading any of these books, because I've mentioned them in the video, let me know and tell me in the comments if these are any of your top 10 books, or if you maybe even hated some of these books. And to shamelessly plug once again, It's All I Do, my book A Royal's Game is out now. I'll put the link in the bio of where you can buy it. And if any of those books are in your top 10, then you will love A Royal's Game. And hopefully I've given you some inspiration for your TBR this year. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm reading this year, then you should definitely subscribe and also check out my TikTok and my Instagram. I mainly post what I'm reading on my Instagram. So as always, it is a goodbye from me and goodbye from A Royal's Game. And hopefully we'll see you next time.